Hi, this is Bob from the podcast Rockton. I'm here with Brian. We're here to go over Lick It Up by Kiss. You got to be on this tour.
We were. That was in 1983. We had just been signed to Capitol Records, and we started off in Lisbon, Portugal, and we played 13 countries in 32 days across Europe. We only really played one date in the North America, and that was at Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, I believe.
And the album starts out with Exciter. It's a great start to the album. It brings it to a high pace tempo and everything and gets you well introduced to the album. I think Vinny's best solo is on this track. He doesn't really stand out a whole lot on this album, but I feel he does stand out on a track. The solo is amazing. Um, in a way, it brought me to the same intro that Creatures did, has that same feel as Creatures of the Night.
Can I interject here for a second? I didn't realize we were going to be doing the Kiss album. I didn't even know that album.
Oh, no problem at all.
I know, like, Lick It Up, but that's about it. And Cuts Like a Knife, I think, was on that.
So tell me, how was it like backstage? Did you get to meet the guys and get to know them?
I saw Gene almost every morning. He'd be there. They were quite visible. They'd show up at gig time for sure. But we talked to them. They're nice people, all of them. Just normal people for the most part. Gene's Gene,
Yeah,
but he is one of the most famous people in the world. So I give him a little bit of latitude.
yes. And I wanted to ask you, um, there was later on in that tour, there were instances where that led to Vinny leaving the band because he's taking too long on his solos, and they'd ask him to stop, and he'd keep on going during the live shows. Were there any incidents like that when you played with him?
I never saw any disagreements or anything with the band. They kept that pretty private. And that's where it should be if you're a professional act. You don't air your grievances out in public. Although some people in Kiss over the years have done that. On that tour, I didn't see any of that stuff happen.
Yeah, they always seem to carry themselves professionally, but in reading all their books, if you want four different stories to the same scene, you could ask Kiss and you get all four different answers.
Right. Well, I trust Gene and Paul the most just because of the fact they were straight.
Mm.
People do things because of alcohol and drugs. And those two guys were there to make music and run a business. And I respect that.
Yeah, and they've always done well in running a business. Where did they give you any advice as to the business end for your band?
Well, the only real advice they give us was about the second date. Gene pulled us all into a room and he sat us down. And he said, I think you're imitating some of our stuff out there because we'd be sitting out the stage. We actually be taking notes
Mm.
to improve our own show, right? And just get some ideas. I don't think we directly ripped them off for any ideas or anything like that. But he said to us, he says, nobody wants a little kiss. And that was about the extent of the advice, which kind of meant quit imitating us or you're off the tour.
And being on the undercard, um, how was the experience for you?
Experience was great. I look back at it, it was a high point of our career. Kiss was one of the greatest bands in the world, hottest band in the world, as they say.
Yes.
And really, they treated us very good. At the end of the tour, they actually said, how come you didn't party with us more? And we had thought that they wanted us to keep our distance and not get too close. So
Mhm.
we were kind of surprised when they said that. And looking back, we wish we would have associated probably more with the band. But we were just trying to mind our P's and Q's and not get into trouble. After all, we were the opening act. So, and it was a great honor to actually open for Kiss on that tour.
Yeah, there's always a great energy in the crowd at Kiss Show, and they've always had this magic throughout the years live. You listen to the energy of Live One, and it captured such amazing moments of just pure energy and straight rock and roll.
Yeah, and I think those live albums that kind of doctor them up in the studio because when you're jumping around on the stage and you're trying to look physical up there, like you're having a good time, because you know that energy you got on stage when you're moving around and doing those things, that energy's transferred to the crowd and it gets them going. So you're less concerned about making sure every note's dead on than
Sure.
you are to putting on a good show. I think when they went back and they did the live albums, they had to, fix some stuff. They didn't realize that they were missing notes and things like that. But even Helix, when we listen to the all night tape, if we have an especially rambunctious night, let's say, where we're moving around a lot, working the audience and that, there's bound to be mistakes. Even just throwing your guitar around puts it out of tune. So you run up against those problems, but you have to find a compromise and a balance between
Sure.
the live show and the actual musicality of it all.
Sure. And I think that tracks live just provide more energy and just a great feel. It's like being there. I sat and listened to the remasters of the Live One album, and it's just phenomenal to hear the sound and the energy involved. You're not really paying attention to how technical it is. It's about the feeling and emotion of being there.
That's correct. And we were lucky because we had two different guitar players in the band. We had Brent Durner, who was a very exact player. He's a fantastic rhythm player. There's not many great rhythm players out there. There's all these guys that can play a million notes in a second. But as far as good rhythm players go, they're few and far between. Paul,
Sure.
on the other hand, was a very blues orientated guitar player. He listened to Richie Blackmore and Journey and people like that. And he had this old pre CBS Strat that had grooves right in the frets. So when he pressed the strings down too hard, the thing would go sharp. So they're two different guitar players playing wise, but they complemented each other very well.
And to me, one of the most underrated rhythm guitar players of all time is Malcolm Young. Just the
That's
way
what I
he,
mean by a good rhythm player.
yeah,
And he
absolutely.
wrote most of their songs, I think. Did he not?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I wanted to ask you, during them years, what were the highlights of that tour for you? What were the gigs that really hit the hardest?
Um, well, we played Paris in a great big tent. I remember that. We played Wembley Arena. Um, that was a big gig for us. We played in Glasgow, Scotland, Edinburgh, Scotland. But almost every date was special because you were playing with Kiss, one of the greatest bands in the world. I remember traveling. We were in a little English van, which was kind of ridiculous, let's say, because we rented it in England. But as soon as we got out of England, you were shifting and driving on the other side of the road. So it was very confusing as a driver. And we all took shifts back then, driving the vehicle, and we slept in the van. The gear was in this English van. There was a sheet of plywood on top, and we slept on top of it like a bunch of sardines. If we would have ever have rolled that vehicle, we probably all would have died. But we were lucky, and we didn't. So I remember touring like that. It was very difficult, but I also remember meeting the record company in Vienna for Vienna. No, actually, it was Linz, Austria. The woman from the record company from EMI came and with a boyfriend. And on the way back to the gig that night, he was driving so slow that bicycles were passing us on the street. And we almost didn't make the gig. They had to hold up our show so Paul and I could get there in time and go on stage. So that was kind of funny. And I remember buying chestnuts, roasted chestnuts on the street from vendors, and just a different place we went in Europe because it was all a new experience for us. And going to places like Vienna and Brussels, Belgium, and every place was different and a shock to the senses, let's say.
Sure. And during the 80s, I wanted to ask you when the the pinnacle of your popularity happened, what was the feelings that you went through emotionally, and were you prepared for that?
Well, we were prepared for it because we went through many years in the bar. So we gradually built ourselves up to the point where success didn't come instantly. It was like a little bit at a time. So I think we were more prepared than, say, bands today, which uh, write songs in the basement. They get a record deal, and suddenly they're thrust out there on tour, and they can't handle the accolades. They can't handle just even living with the other people in the band 24/7. So we were prepared from one sense of looking at it, but on the other hand, you're never really prepared when you get hit with success that big. And the feeling at the time was, I want to make more money
Right.
because we never really made a lot of money. Even in our glory days, we made like $200 a week. So our wives are complaining back home, and girlfriends, and my parents were saying, "Hey, what's going on here? You know, you got these gold and platinum albums, and you're not making money. What's up with that?" And they always figured that maybe the manager's ripping you off and things like that. But in reality, we took the money that we made and we invested it back into the band. That
Sure.
was something that we did from the start of Helix, right from 1974 on. We always invested a certain amount of money back into buying clothes, photo sessions, buying better gear. We spent it on vehicles to move the equipment.
Sure.
And so we were pouring that money back into the band, trying to get to that next level. And we never quite made it, but we got to world stages, which was a great experience.
Sure. And I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't you agree that bands that recorded in the analog era became better musicians live because of the pressures of recording and that you had to come through with it?
Well, I don't know about that because, I've seen both sides of it. But back when we started recording, you didn't use a click track every time you recorded. And nowadays, click tracks that's just taken for granted that you're going to be
Yeah.
playing to a click track because that way you can add keyboards or vocals, whatever you want. Back in the day, though, there was no click track a lot of times. You had to keep your timing. And if you listen to some old recordings from back in the day, Heat of the Moment by Asia is one of them. It speeds up, slows down. Same with Motley Crue's version of Smoking in the Boys' Room. But once again, that technicality gave way to feel. And
Mhm.
it was more important to go in the studio, and we'd always go for a track, a bad track. And by bad track, those of you that don't know recording, bad track is the drums, bass, and rhythm guitar. And you'd have a ghost vocal, which meant I'd sing, but then we'd redo the vocal later on. But we wanted to feel excitement off that bad track before we did any more recording, before we layered any harmonies, before we did the lead vocal, it was a different attitude when you went into the recording studio. We also used a 2-inch tape, and so you'd have to have one reel, which contained probably about 3 songs, and then you always had to have a backup reel. So it
Sure.
was very expensive because even back then it was, I think, about $250 per tape. So when you did an album, you needed almost 12 tapes. And I think our first album we spent $24,000. Nowadays you can make a pretty respectable album on $24,000.
Sure.
And that was low budget back then. And incidentally, we were one of the first bands ever to do an indie album. It was unheard of. The natural protocol back then was to get some tunes together, make a demo tape, send it to the record company, and then they'd listen to it and they'd come out and look at you. And if they liked you, they'd sign you. Nowadays, and bands just didn't put out indie albums. But we decided to do it because we got turned down by every major label. And so Breaking Loose, White Lace and Black Leather, we recorded and released ourselves after I left Capital EMI in 1989, 1990, around that time period, then I started putting out my own albums again. And, for the whole decade, basically, we had other people doing those things, steadying up the studio time, hiring the extra musicians, finding the producer. And suddenly I had to do it. So it was a whole new learning experience for me. And slowly I got used to doing it. Now, when I do an album, it's pretty par for the course. I know what I'm doing, and I know which people to go to. I try. People ask me, why don't you have a recording studio? And I go, well, if you really want to be good at something, you got to be doing it 24/7. And I'm never going to be as good as, say, Aaron Murray or Daryl in my band at recording production, because I don't do it all day long. And not only that, I don't want to do it. It's
Right.
not one of my desires in life. But those two guys, they did the last album for us. They're very much into production, and they do it every day and all year long. And Aaron, especially, is on the cusp of where recording's going. He was the student of Danny Broadbeck, who worked with Dolores O'Riordan from the Cranberries, and Danny was the protege of Jack Richardson, who produced the Guess Who, Bob Seger, Alice Cooper. So great lineage of producers there. I always look at a person's track record when I work with them,
Mm.
and that's very important. If they've produced hit albums before, or done great recordings, or written great songs, I think that's an indication that they'll probably do it again with me. So that's what I look for.
And did you get the opportunity to work with what producers did you get to work with the most?
Well, we worked with Mike Stone on the Wild in the Streets album, but before then we had Tom Tramuth. He discovered the band along with our manager Bill Sipe, and did the No Rest of the Wicked album. And then we had Tony Bongiovi do the mix. And Tony was down at the Power Station, New York City, and had done the Aldanova album, and it had become a huge hit. And so we used Tony Bongiovi, and I think Tony really gave us a sound back then. I love that sound. On the next album, we went to Rodney Mills, who had done production with 38 Special, and he worked down in Atlanta with a lot of Southern bands. And on the next album, I think we did it with Tom Tramuth again. So we used a variety of different people over the years. And, I think we did Live at the Marquee with Stephen Handhart, when we were over in England. Might have that wrong, but yeah, some great people.
And since we last talked, you got to be very excited about the traction the new album has got. It's really starting to hit well.
It's a well-produced album. I think well-written songs. That's indicative of how we sounded back in the '80s. I think people yearn for that decade in time, not only from musical standpoint, but just the freedom that we experienced. We were young. You could say what you wanted, and you didn't have 2,000 cameras shoved in your face, telling the whole world what you just said. And uh, so much more freer time. We did some reckless things, but we didn't kill ourselves, luckily. Uh, and I think that album's really indicative of that. We've already started working on the next album, and so it'll probably sound a bit different from that one, because a lot of those songs were Paul Hackman licks. He had written the guitar part and come up with the songs with me originally. And as you know, Paul isn't with us anymore. Um, he was killed in that car accident in the early '90s.
Yes.
So I'm writing with mostly Sean Kelly nowadays. And Sean Kelly plays for Lee Aaron. He's played for Gilby Clarke, Nelly Furtado, and he's a fantastic guitarist. He's one of the best guitar players in Canada, and he's very much in demand with a lot of bands. And I'm very honored and lucky to be working with Sean. We're close friends, and we're actually just we're working on a song last night together. So we'll see where that goes.
And speaking of close friends, I wanted to ask you, what touring partner did you become best friends with?
Bands, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, geez. Well, we're pretty well friends with everybody because Canadian hosts as we're friendly guys, right? I really enjoy playing with Motorhead. I love being with Lemmy, and he was a great guy. But I also liked Ian Gillan. Ronnie James Dio was very nice to us. Ronnie James Dio used to come into our dressing room and he'd sit down in Fritz's practice kit. And I remember one time he said, I like this kit. It's small, just like me. And Ronnie James Dio was one of the few people that would actually come into our dressing room and just be a normal guy,
Yeah.
an everyday person. And he was a great star. Uh, but, the Kiss guys, and then the other bands like Ron Keel, Accept were great to us. Uh, I got a lot of friends in the business. Sebastian Bach is a good friend of mine. And so there's not too many people I don't get along with. Probably the only person I ever had disagreements with was Brian Robertson, who was playing with Motorhead on that Another Perfect Day tour. But I think he had some problems, and we won't get into here.
Right. And and problems are a thing that, has plagued so many bands. With Ace's departure from Kiss and stuff like that.
Too many
Sometimes I
drugs.
think it's sometimes I think that you know, like in bands like Kiss, I followed them since the beginning and it just seemed like you had two partners. You had Gene and Paul that hung together, and you had Pete and Ace that hung together. And when you tried to split that up, it became chaos. And I think that's one of the reasons why there was all the dispute with Ace and stuff is just because of the fact that, you know, Gene and Paul were very, we're going to the studio now. Now's when you need to be at the studio.
Well, they were straight. They
Yeah,
run it like a business.
right.
Too many musicians think they're outside the laws of finance, that they can just party it up and not put on a good show and be fucked up and whatever. And you can't. You got to go out there. You're paid to entertain, and you're paid to put on a good show. And you can't do that when you're all blasted out of your mind and falling around on the stage. And yeah, it's good for a joke or two, but then you become the joke.
Yeah, and I think as you've seen with touring with them during the Lick It Up times, the professionalism of their show,
That's
everything
true.
is totally thought out.
Totally thought out, and they have a great love of music, Paul and Gene. Um, they could have quit years ago. Let's face it, but
Mhm.
they kept going, and I don't think it was for the money. They did it because they love the life, they love the lifestyle. That's why I do it nowadays.
Sure.
If I wasn't making music, I don't know what I do. Uh, I have other pastimes. I like going fishing. I like going golfing. I like doing all that stuff. But when it comes right down to it, the thing that really turns my crank, that really gets my motor running, is writing songs, making
Sure.
albums, creating music, being on stage, entertaining an audience. It's my craft. It's what I've and that's what it is. It's a craft. It's not something you get in a week or 2 weeks or 2 years. You spend a lifetime developing how you work an audience, how to sing, how to play, how to write. And so I won't be quitting anytime soon. I want to be like Johnny Cash, right out to the end.
And I think that's a testament to your music. It's one thing reason I've loved Helix throughout the years is that you've always gave 100% and never no recording I ever listened to that this band your band has done. I said, oh well, that's a 60%, you know, throw in. It's always been 100%. It's always been true.
Well,
And,
thanks.
and that's why I've become such a fan and been a fan for so many years.
Thank you.
As we talked before, I think there's bands that throughout the years have been just put under the radar or under the scope for whatever reason it may be, but it's definitely not based upon talent. because you guys definitely deserve, like I said, to be in the Canadian Hall of Fame, if nothing else, let alone the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And, you know,
Well,
people
here's another thing about
visit
the music
about,
industry, right? As long as you're putting out music, it's not like baseball where you take three strikes and you're out.
right.
You never know. You might have that odd hit that ends up on a TV program or commercial.
Sure.
A perfect example is Rat. Didn't hear too much about Rat for a couple of years, and all of a sudden they had the insurance commercial,
Yeah, all
and
right.
they're all over TV, and suddenly Rat's back. So it can be something simple as that. In our career, for instance, the '90s when grunge came in was a very lean time for us, let's say, and then all of a sudden we had that connection with the Trailer Park Boys, and I ended up touring with them out in Western Canada. We did several dates, and then I was in the movie A Countdown to Liquor Day with Alex Lifeson from Rush, and so that kind of kept their career going for a couple of years. You just have to keep moving forward, and I don't have a mirror that sees around corners, but you never know what's going to be around that corner and how it's going to keep you going. So I just move forward and enjoy life. Not, I don't think too much about it more so than that.
And we talked that you were working on new material. How is the material coming for you?
Well, I think we got a really good song last night. I, I actually started the song when I was back for the record release party about a month ago in Canada, and I took a trip up to Toronto, and it was horrendous traffic. And but I set up this meeting with Sean to get together and write, and I never try to cancel a writing session because I go, this could be the this could be the one. And so we got together, and for the first, I would say, hour, we were struggling to get something, and all of a sudden we just hooked onto a chorus, and we got this great chorus. And when I got back home, I said to Sean, I said, I hear the feel more like this in the verse. So he'll send me a lick. And last night I sat down and wrote all the lyrics to the song. So he's going to phone me tonight when he gets home from work. And he teaches guitar at Coalition in Toronto, which is Arnold Lanny's brother's company. Arnold Lanny was from Frozen Ghost, and he produced, I think, Nine Inch Nails, a lot of big bands and things like that. But he's going to phone me when we get home, and we'll do back and forth across the internet. And then when I get home to Canada in April, I'll go up and get together with him. We'll finish off the writing and then probably record the song right away. It's nice to do things when they're fresh. I don't like letting them leave, sit around too long. Although stuck in the '80s, we had that song for 2 years sitting around.
Yeah, and it's a great track. And I'll tell you what, I was very happy to see you come back with something so strong. And,
Thanks. Well, I think once again, people can identify with what that song's about, um, especially the line that goes, uh, "Take a ride in my time machine back to when we were free, so much more than we are today. I don't know what can I say. I'm stuck in the '80s." And that sentiment once again, and people my age, I'm 70 now. I'm going to be 71 in June. But a lot of people from that decade that experienced it, they long for those times again, those very special times and memories,
absolutely.
and I think that was the main attraction of the song. They could identify with the lyrics.
Yeah, I remember one of my first shows was seeing Blue Oyster Cult, and ticket was under $10. Shows how much things have changed.
Yeah, and not only that, first concert, first time you got laid, first time you smoked a joint, first time you did
Yeah,
everything.
absolutely. Well, I wanted to thank you again for taking time to speak with me. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, my friend.
Nice speaking to you too.
And I look forward to the news material. And please keep me up to date with what's coming up, my friend.
I will.
All
I
right.
will.
You take
Take
care,
care.
my
You have a
friend.
great day.
You
Don't
too.
be scared
Thank
to see you
you.
around. Catch you on the flip side. Whoosh.